While world leaders gathered for the COP28 climate talks in Dubai, Russia's Vladimir Putin was busy discussing oil prices in Abu Dhabi. The Russian president, on a rare visit to the Gulf, held talks with his UAE counterpart before he headed to Saudi Arabia, where he met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. Putin's brief trips came just a day before he hosted Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi in Moscow. The back-to-back meetings has many pointing to Russia's latest push to shore up its influence in the energy-rich Gulf. Putin and Raisi discussed trade, defense ties and the latest situation in Gaza, where Israel's ground operations have intensified. Moscow has been openly critical of Israel's disproportionate response and continued U.S. support, echoing many countries in the Gulf. Over the past year, Russia has stepped up its energy coordination with Saudi Arabia through OPEC+, with both countries calling for members to join their production cuts. So has Russia's influence in the Gulf grown since the start of the conflict in Gaza? And are traditional U.S. allies rethinking the region's changing power balances? And now to discuss the recent visits of the Russian leader to the Gulf and of the Iranian president to Moscow. Joining me from Geneva is Abdul Rasul Divsalar. He's a non-resident scholar at Middle East Institute, and from Como, Italy, Chiara Lovotti. She's a research fellow at Italian Institute for International Political Studies. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Chiara, what do you make of the Russian president Vladimir Putin's Middle East tour? Why now?
Well, why now? Of course, as you know, it has been mentioned, especially by the media, that the Gaza war was on the agenda. And that, of course, was, allow me the expression, a due point on the agenda of the meetings between President Putin and his Saudi, Emirate and Iranian counterparts. I don't think it's even possible not to discuss the war in Gaza right now during any state visit globally, let alone if, of course, it involves leaders from the Middle East. But, and Russia does, it is true that Russia does have a real interest in the containment of the conflict. If the conflict had to expand to other countries of the region, that would enormously complicate Russia's mission in Syria. It would complicate Russia's interests in Lebanon, Israel, the Arab Gulf, etc., etc. Of course, the Gaza war was on the agenda, but I don't think it was the main priority why these leaders met during these days. The reasons why Putin traveled to the region and why Raisi traveled to Moscow were different, and they have more to do with Ukraine and emerging new global orders than they had to do with Gaza.
As well as the oil prices. But Abdul Rasul, what's your take on the very warm welcome given to the Russian president in the United Arab Emirates, which is already hosting the COP28 climate talks? I mean, did he somehow overshadow the UN summit?
Well, on some point we may look at that this way, but I would prefer to say that I think this was a trend we've been seeing from a time that the Arab countries in the region are trying to diversify their partnerships, either in security-wise or an economic way, with different actors across the globe. But basically, it's now quite hard to call them necessarily U.S. allies in a very clear-cut term, because they are the same way trying to build relations with China, with Russia, and other actors across the world. So from this perspective, I would say that that was part of this ongoing trend, and that was not a major surprise. But well, how it impacted COP28, the COP events these days, I would suggest that remains to be discussed, especially given the fact that I think Russia in any way needs sort of, also diversify its trade partnerships, and looking to the region as an important, very important actor in this, let's say, process of sanction evasion that Moscow is following now.
So, Chiara, give us an insight. I mean, what kind of a fine line do the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia walk between Russia and their most important security ally, the U.S.?
Well, of course, I think both the Saudis and the Emirates want to, as Abdullah Sal was saying, diversify their partnerships. They cannot allow to go back to a world as it was in the 90s, where the only partner was the United States. And on the other side, it's the same that Russia wants to do. Russia needs the Middle East region, the Saudis, the Emirates, and the Iranians to be their close allies. By the way, it's a spectacular welcome that was given to President Putin in the United Arab Emirates. Let's not forget the United Arab Emirates right now are one of Russia's closest partners in the region. Many Russians, both oligarchs and common people, have moved their money from European capitals to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, of course, to avoid Western sanctions. So, and I think there is also in these three meetings, there is also an intent from the Russian side, especially, and from the Iranian side, to send an image somehow, an image of, it's like saying to the West, look, despite sanctions and isolation, our two countries, Russia and Iran, are moving on. And Russia is cooperating with the broader Middle East region, despite having, almost close relationship with the West. So it's also about
So, as we've just mentioned, Russian President Vladimir Putin has also welcomed his Iranian counterpart, Ebrahim Raisi, in Moscow a day after visiting the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So we know that the conflicts in the Middle East have topped their agenda, but why does Gaza matter for Russia?
Well, I think, again, back to the sort of analysis of the Russian Middle East policy for a couple of years now, I think Russia has been always wanted to be a sort of mediator and a power broker in the region. That ambition remains with Moscow even now. I mean, to the extent how it would be successful, that's a question. There are a lot of doubts on whether Russia right now has the ability over such a process, either because of its very difficult relation with Israel, also because of the war in Ukraine. But on the top of that, I think that let's say actual interest of Russia to the Middle East is very much roots in the real politics. I mean, Russia needs Middle East, as was mentioned, because of various reasons. Because now it's one of the only, let's say, regional regions across the world that welcomes Russia like that, can do the trade, and can Russia still see some interest for its future with the Middle East. Basically, that is on the top of the strategic interest of Moscow to continue working with the Persian Gulf region.
So, Kira, has Israel's war with Hamas helped Moscow to distract the world attention from the war in Ukraine and boost its ties with the regional countries? I mean, does Russia see it in a way, kind of opportunity?
Yeah, of course, the war in Gaza distracts attention, especially media attention, from Russia's actions in Ukraine. So in a way, it plays in Russia's basket. But let's not forget that Russia has also difficulties stemming from a possible complication of the conflict in the region, especially in Syria, which is Russia's crown jewel in its Middle East policy, and one of the main military projections that Russia has, not just in the Middle East, but globally. If the conflict enlarges to that regions, especially to Syria, that would be very complicated for Russia. But of course, it's the war somehow pleases the Russians. It also helps Russian propaganda to somehow accuse the West and say that what is happening in Gaza is fault of years of failed Western policies.
Yes. So, Iran said last month that it had finalized arrangements for Russia to provide it with Su-35 fighter jets as well as attack helicopters. So, what kind of political and military ramifications will this military cooperation have on the region, and how concerned should the U.S. be?
Well, that's a tricky question because of various factors. I think the Russian-Iranian military agreements, or let's say cooperations, it's again, it's an ongoing trend, at least for the last 3 decades. Russia being the only arms provider to Iran since 90s in various formats and various different stages. And throughout these 3 decades, I think one principle was on the top of the Russia's way of providing security assistance to Iranians, and that was keeping in mind the balance of the power in the region. So I think Russia's broader interest is to not let one major hegemon in the region to get to rise, and that basically means that Russia is very much also taking into consideration the Arab countries in the region's security concerns, and that modifies what Russia provides to Iran. So when it comes to Europe and U.S., I think that will remain a major concern for United States, but not necessarily because Russia is providing to Iran some military instruments, but most importantly because now the actually relation is vice versa. Iran is also providing Russia with arms, and that's the core of the concern in the West and especially in the U.S. So what I say is that we need remain to be seen if Iran will provide Russia more offensive capabilities. I personally doubt on that, but we need to see if this deal goes ahead and what type and what sort of armaments Russia will provide to Iran, and what sort of strategic assessments Iranians will have.
So, Kira, how do you read the U.S. position towards the latest realignment process in the Gulf and also Russia's growing influence in the region, as Abdul Rasul mentioned? Do you believe that the U.S. allies are kind of signaling that they have other options and the long-sought peace and stability could only come from within the region?
Yeah, partners in the region are signaling that, but I don't think the U.S. may feel anyway threatened by that. I mean, as far as it concerns, especially the Arab Gulf monarchies, despite the fact that they do collaborate with Russia, they're not abandoning the West, let's say. The fact of diversifying doesn't mean to leave traditional alliances behind, Plus, it is true that Russia is more and more active in the region, but Russia has also very limited power to be effective with capital E, to change the course of events in that region, especially in the Arab Gulf. I think what may preoccupy or should preoccupy the United States more is Russia's increased collaboration with Iran, as we are mentioning.
All right, Kira and Abdul Rasul, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.